So we have Adam Henry. He's an executive producer at Netflix. He started his career as an animator in the movie Iron Giant, and then as a director and storyboard artist at Nickelodeon. He worked in movies like Kung Fu Panda, and also at Dreamworks in projects such as How to Train My Dragon TV show and Jurassic Park. And now Adam is part of Netflix with Dogs in Space TV series. So Adam, that's very few words, but that's a big career. So please walk us through the path of your career and tell us how it was when you were an animator. Did you miss it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I went to CalArts, which, was kind of the sort of the top animation school in the 90s. I guess it still is to some degree, although there are a lot of other good animation schools now. And you can really learn it on your own anyway. But it was a great place to start my career because it's interesting. If you go to school for animation or probably for any profession, a lot of the people you end up going to school with are then the people that are now also disseminating into the business. And so my 2 years at CalArts sort of gave me sort of a tribe to sort of launch my career into, so it was a really positive aspect of that. But yes, I did assume I would be a 2D animator forever, because it was Iron Giant was pencil on paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that movie.
Thank you. That was definitely, an early highlight. And when I was there, I was at Warner Brothers for 5 years, and I was like, this is great. I'll just do this, work at Warner Brothers forever, and it'll be awesome. But then, as you all know, 2D kind of died in the late 90s, and everyone had a choice of, you could keep animating, but on the computer, or you go into story. And I always liked story, and I always liked drawing. And I think even more than story, I didn't want to stop drawing, because when you go into storyboarding and directing, you can, you're still drawing on paper. And then when you get the Cintiqs came along, you're still drawing on the Cintiq. So I still feel like I'm still drawing for the most part. So that was my transition. And that was, a little challenging to go from animator to sort of really learning the tools of storyboarding. Because at the time, it takes like 3, 4, 5 years of boarding a lot to really be ready for all the jobs that you get. Because for like the first 10 years of my career, I felt like every job was like, oh, I have to learn a new style of boarding, or this time it's action, this time it's comedy, this time it's Dora the Explorer, this time it's How to Train Your Dragon. There's so many different aspects of like storyboarding and styles. And every show, of course, as every show has a different style of drawing. And so not only do you have to sort of bring your skills of storyboarding, you have to now adapt your whatever style you draw to the show. And that can, and everyone has a certain style of drawing. And mine was always on the looser side. So any show that was kind of along those lines went really well. Shows that were a little like you had to draw stiffer, straighter, cleaner was always a little more challenging for me. Prime time, I always found a little challenging because there's really less boarding and almost character layout where you're like doing the animation drawing, and overseas is just tracing what you've done for the most part, as opposed to other shows where you can just do kind of crazy, fun, rough stuff. And then, they animate it off of that. But, I was in the story track now. So I left animation. So now I'm in story. And, the journey of story is, revision, storyboard artist, director, supervising director, producer, showrunner. And then if you get really lucky, pitch your own show, sell that. And now you're, really in charge of everything. Like my most recent show, Dogs in Space, was there was a creator, Jeremiah Cortez, sold the show to Netflix. But he'd never worked in animation before. He actually got the call that he sold the show when he was driving a forklift. That he sold the show to Netflix. He'd been involved in animation, he'd done some teaching, and he'd been a character designer, but he hadn't worked in the business. So they had him interview a bunch of people, and we got along really well. And so I came in as the grizzled old veteran to, make the show for and with him. And I did that on She-Ra at Dreamworks also. There was a young showrunner, Noelle Stevenson, sorry. So they brought me in again to help her run that show. So you get to a certain point where you sort of start helping people, make shows, which is a really rewarding experience also. So that's kind of been my track, but it's been, I probably have been in 30, maybe 40 different jobs in 22 years. And that's something I think everyone, that's what I learned fast is like every job ends.
Every
true.
job ends.
Job ends. So you're always looking for the next gig. And that for some people, I think that's really stressful. And it was kind of a little stressful for me, more so for my wife at the beginning. I think she was like, what, we're unemployed, and then, but
again.
But now I tell her, oh, this job's ending. And she's like, whatever, you'll find something, So she feels a little bit better about it now, but it's a challenge.
It's a challenge, yeah.
The other thing is, in the early 2000s, there weren't as many jobs. There was there's probably 15% of what it is now. Like if there's 25 shows in 2004, there's like 225 shows out there now. So there's a lot more content. There's a lot more work. It's a great time to be in animation and be in the business. So,
and what is the role of the executive producer? What does that role do inside a series or a movie?
Yeah. For Dogs in Space, the Netflix show that I just finished, although season 2 is coming out later. Everything. It was like from development. Because again, the creator and I got along really well, so we really were a good team. And he really listened to me, when I had, we should do this or that, or this will affect production. So it was like from development through we sat in the writing, the writer's room for 2 weeks. We had like 4 writers come in. We sat with them and we broke down the first 10 episodes of Dogs in Space. The production side of animation, there's like the creative side of animation, the production side of animation. The creative side is really fun. Get to do a lot of fun stuff. The production side will kill you. Because everyone works in a box, like a thing. And that's something that young artists have to learn also. That one, even at my level, running a show, you're going to always have bosses. Unless you're signing the check, you're going to have bosses forever, and when you're a board artist, you're going to have about 12 bosses, looking at your work, giving notes and everything. So, even though you're a great artist and you're still creating in a box. So everyone's creating in a box, and that box is production, because here's the amount of money to make the show. Here's the amount of time you have to make the show. Go, and it's never enough money and it's never enough time. So, sort of working in those parameters is always an aspect of animation that, people have to get used to. And I have to, sort of manage when I'm sort of in charge of everything. So there was the working with Jeremiah, the creator, getting him the show that he wanted. But then there was the production where everything had to line up. Every show had to sort of, hit its deadlines. All the artists had to be, happy and working well. And all the logistics of that. So running a show is both those sides of it. And seeing as I grew up in storyboarding and directing, even as a showrunner, even though I'm in charge of, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 people, I'll jump in and just start boarding stuff, or I'll finish directing an animatic for a director if they're crashing and burning. So, but every showrunner kind of comes at it differently. There's writers that are the showrunners, so they don't, have that capability. They usually have a creative producer under them that is helping the production, or you have like a character designer who sold the show. Now he's, and he doesn't know story. So every show, even though they're all kind of doing the same job, they come at it from different angles and have different strengths and weaknesses. At this point in my career, I've done pretty much everythkind, from writing to pitching to boarding to directing to animating.
It's a lot of experience.
To post-production, there's kind of 3 parts to animation, as you probably know. There's pre-production where you're writing it, boarding it, getting the animatics all up and running, and then you ship it off to, Canada, the Philippines, Korea, South America, and then it gets animated there. And then it comes back. Then it comes back all fully animated, and now you're in post-production. So you're doing the music, you're doing the sound, you're sort of retiming everything. You're doing the color. So there's a lot of back end stuff. The final mix where, you have like a big session where you're making sure all the levels are the same, and you're going back and forth with the musicians to make sure they're doing it right. So there's, that's like the 3rd part of it, and you're delivering it to Netflix or Disney or whatever. So that's kind of how animation is broken up. Although you tell your mom and dad, and you're like, yeah, I'm in animation. And they assume you're animating, you're writing, you're drawing, you're doing, and you try and explain to them, and they just kind of get glassy eyed and just like,
yeah, they don't understand a thing.
Right. So that's kind of the short, long version of my career. But
when the movies are running out of money or the series, that is something that you need to keep an eye on as well. And how do you also get the money to fund the series or to fund the movie? Might be stressful because it's money. You're dealing with money. You have to know all the parameters.
Again, it's the compartmentalization of animation where I'm the showrunner, but I'm not the money person. They have line producers. They're in charge of the budget. They're in charge of, hiring, getting the salaries. And also they're the ones who come to you and say, we're out of money. And then you as the producer have to come up with like shortcuts or ways to save money or, sort of problem solve. But generally when you're on the creative end, like I am, you're not dealing with the money. Like I know how much an episode costs, or I know how much money the show has, or I know, kind of the general details of anything. But there's the creative producer and there's a line producer, and in animation they're separate. But you want to work really closely with your line producer so that you're going back and forth, and you don't want to be surprised one day with like, we're out of money. You want to know, hey, 3 months from now we'll be out of money. Then you can solve the problem. You don't want to know the day before you run out of money.
No.
And it was kind of to me, it was kind of a joke at when I was at one company where, I would say, look, we're going to be out of money in 3 months from this show. And they'd be like, don't worry about it. They won't listen to you until you're out of money. And then you go to them and say, we're out of money. And then they reach into their drawer and they pull out a bunch of cash and just throw it at the show again. So kind of the philosophy in a lot of shows is, they won't fix it until it's on fire.
If someone has an idea and builds and works on a Bible, and they have all the characters, and they have the texturing and the lighting of those characters, and they have the log lines and everything ready as far as the Bible format, how does this work? I mean, this kid, this professional, or this small company in Latin America, where they should go? What's the best suggestion you can give?
All right, yeah. So let's get into sort of pitching shows, because I feel like it is two separate things. It's sort of like, are you working in animation where, you just work on your portfolio, work on your skill set, become a great character designer, a great BG painter, or a great storyboard artist, so you follow that track and you want to work and make money, which, you have to do, which is, even when you're trying to create a show, you still have to do that. So let's say you're doing that track, you're creating your portfolio, you're working, maybe getting freelance in animation or working at a studio, but on the side, you want to be rich and famous. So you want to come up with a show. It's hard. It's definitely hard. It's like I said, Dogs in Space, the creator that I was working with, he kind of knew someone who knew someone at Netflix and was able to pitch it sort of backdoor to them. And it kind of like just happened really fast. And I always tell him like, oh, I hate you so much because it happened way too easy for him. But, there are those stories. But then there's stories like, like a show like Phineas and Ferb at Disney. They were pitching that show for 10 years, variations on it. And they never but they're also working in animation at the time. So, they had those connections. And that certainly is a lot of it. Like, being in LA, meeting people, pitching to people, having that sort of connection. So it is, animation, as you know, is still very LA based to a certain degree. But that said, I feel like creating your own IP is a great way to go. So, and I don't think I'm saying anything new, but, doing a comic strip on your Instagram, doing videos on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you want to get it out there, creating a graphic novel. I mean, I think a graphic novel is a great way to do it. If you have a story to tell and you have the time and the skill, or you have friends that you can like write it and someone else can draw it, create a graphic novel, create something online, create your own IP. Don't even think about like, I have to sell this. Create your story because there's so many ways to get it out there. So just create it, do it, get it out there. And then, then you can sort of start reaching out to people. But even better is ideally people now have seen it and they reach out to you, because really the best thing is like, oh, I've got 30, 40,000 followers on TikTok or Instagram. That's what the studios are interested in, having that sort of connection. So that would be my recommendation. If you're not like here in LA meeting people all the time and having the opportunity to pitch, if you're not inside the studios, then create your own IP. Don't worry about who you're pitching it to. Just create great content and get it out there. And then, at that point, you will start meeting people. People will say, oh, this is I love your cartoon, or I love your video. And they happen to work at Netflix, or they know someone who works at Netflix. Oh, that's great. Thanks. Blah, blah, blah. So you just start trying to build as many connections as you can. Because at the end of the day, you're probably within 3 or 4 people of finding someone who works at Netflix.
It seems like Netflix values a lot of content that comes from different parts of the world. And if it is original from a different part away from the US and the UK, might have its value. So what do you see the future of this content development or the requirements that Netflix is looking for?
I think the future is outside of the United States for these larger streaming companies, because Netflix, they're not going to get, everyone in America watches Netflix. They're not going to get a lot of, because all they care about is growth at the end of the day. Sidebar, it amazes me, like in a business, you made $100 million last year profit, and you made $99 million profit the next year. That's failure. And I'm like, no, you made $99 million profit, but no, you have to make $101 million profit and then $102 million profit. So, these companies need subscriptions. And I think it's all outside of the US now. I think it's in South America. I think it's in Asia. I think it's in Europe. I think that's where. So I think they are going to be, really looking for that, content that's not,
And for example, when you pitch the Bible or pitch to investors, what are the toughest questions that they ask usually? Like maybe in the story or maybe in the characters, they focus on their story more?
You say investors, but again, for me, it's more you're pitching to a studio. So maybe you mean the same thing. You're pitching to Netflix, or you're pitching to a production company like a Bento Box or a Titmouse, who, will make a pilot and then pitch it to the studios. So in terms of like actual, investors, it can happen. I was on a show in the early 2000s called Zula Patrol, which was on PBS, public television. And the woman found $7 million investor. She was able to do and then she also connected to PBS that said, okay, if you make this science show, we'll air it. And so she was able to work it with an investor and with a connection to a, and distributor. That's possible. And it's not a bad way to go, because it's also I don't know, it's did Cocomelon start? I think it just started, probably someone invested in making those cartoons and then got it onto YouTube. So in terms of how you sell it to an investor, I really think it just has to be super charming and fun, and probably in a perfect world, because investors can't really see it until it's a finished product. If you can animate it, or at least part of it, just showing them like a document, I would think is less effective than here's a minute of animation of the show. So the more content you can show them, I feel like the easier it is. Or if it's been on YouTube and it's just like you're an individual or a small group and you've got 30 of these short cartoons, then I think going to an investor or to a studio is a lot easier than just saying, here's my idea.
Uh-huh.
Have you thought about providing some kind of coaching as part of your services, Adam? Is something that you are interested in?
I mean, if someone comes to me individually, yeah. I read scripts, people have shown me their pitches. So yeah, but not as anything more than that at the moment. But again, it's not easy, as development executives get probably 1,000 pitches a year.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll pick 3 to sort of, invest in. And, that's the hard part, is like, they've seen it all. And so I would say in terms of pitching, because you could have a great story, but it could be kind of similar or like something else. If there's any way you can make it like something they haven't seen before, that's always probably the best pitch. Because as soon as they say, this is kind of like, the meeting's over,
Yeah.
So to really, to be honest, as soon as they recognize it as something they've seen in any form, anywhere, it's over.
Adam, what about the future of your career? What are you looking for the next 5 years?
I mean, I've tried to pitch shows of my own. It is kind of a goal of mine, and I'm pretty well connected. I could pitch to anyone I want, but, finding that show that, catches them. So I think, in the next 5 years, I would love to have my own show. I wrote a script for a primetime show, like a Bob's Burgers, Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of adult sitcom.
Yeah.
So I wrote a script for that, and I'm actually working on a Bible for that. So in a perfect world, I would sell my own show. But there are other things at this stage in my career. I love running a show. I know how to run a show. My next job at Nick will be running a show, like that's in season 7, but they're all going to work on a movie. So they need someone to take over season 7 and run that show for them. So I'm going to do that. I love, at this point, IP kind of interests me. There's a lot of these studios like Dreamworks, Disney, Netflix, they have, or like even comic book companies, they have IP, they have graphic novels that they'd like to create a cartoon out of or a show out of. And so I'd like to take one of those, sort of someone else's show, and say, do it like this. And sort of like how She-Ra, when I was at Dreamworks, She-Ra was a 1980s kind of cheesy, somewhat misogynistic cartoon. And so, this woman came in, a young writer, and she said, what if they're all like angsty 17-year-olds, instead? But basically the exact same story. We didn't change what She-Ra was, or really any of the characters' motivations or anything. We just sort of dove into sort of the way a 17-year-old were. It was like more emotional and more, internal. Whereas the 1980s She-Ra was more, just sort of fun, cartoony drama. So she took IP and she gave it her own spin, and they loved that, and it turned out really well. So that's another thing I like to do, taking IP and doing something would be fun. Running my own show is always fun. Managing people is, I once asked a showrunner, what's the hardest job of running a show? And you'd think, the creative or the budget or, the production. It's the people. People are always the most challenging and the hardest part, because you have like 30 different people, and, managing them, especially in a pandemic, can be challenging because everyone sort of has personal things going on that can affect their art. And you have to be really attuned to how everyone's feeling at the end of the day. Because animation will just grind you out. It is a hard job. I love it that it's like one of the few things out there that's still, it's an art job. You're drawing. There's not a lot of areas where you can make a lot of money and just draw cartoons, so it's great in that. But, the time and the budget that they give for the cartoons are very tight, and everyone's working, anywhere from 40 to 70-hour weeks. It can really burnout is a real issue, and some people handle it better than others. So you have to always be aware of that. And also the other thing, as a manager what's interesting is, and again, in pandemic, of course, it's even harder, but, communicating, like there would be a lot of problems. And I would be at a certain point, I would just say, okay, everyone stop. Everyone has to get in a room and talk now. Cause it's like this person talking to that person, then this person's doing this and they're doing that. And everyone's annoyed with that. And it's just like, everyone now stop and talk about it together in a room until the problem is solved. And then you can kind of move on to the next problem. So I feel like, communication, it's kind of a cliche, but communication in a company and in a production is super important. And it's, when you're sort of the creator or the showrunner, I read an article on a live action producer who's a creator of shows. And he said, every single day I have to say what my vision is. You think you can say, this is what I want the show to be. This is my vision. And then you're like done. He said, no, every moment, every day for the entire length of the production, you have to tell people what your vision is, what you want. And that's the only way to get, otherwise it doesn't work.
Well, great. Adam, we're coming to the end of the show. So it would be very nice to hear your words for the Latin American professionals and people that might be interested in following that path, something similar, or as I just mentioned at the beginning, not putting their dreams in their backpack and just forget about them. Right. So what do you have to say to all those people?
Well, one, I think, on LinkedIn, I'm looking at all the artists that are posting on LinkedIn, and if I see someone I like, I follow them, I connect with them. And if, down the road, if I need someone, I'm going to go through my LinkedIn people and see, okay, this one's a great board artist. This one's a great painter. I'm going to track them down and see if they're free at this point, wherever they live. So don't think that you're stuck away in some faraway place, or far away from LA.
Far away from LA, yes.
Yeah, not far away from where you are, but far away from where you think the hub of where it's happening is. Just work on your craft and get it out there, and try and make as many connections as you can in the business. It's all, like I said, you want to find your tribe, you want to find your people. Find your people, build that sort of community, and it takes a little sort of getting out of your own space to do that. But as long as you do that and you pursue your art and you're a good artist, I think you can find a way to, work in the business. So at this point in the world, there's no reason to stop anybody from being a good artist. And, if you want to be a good artist, you don't just I'm going to do this art, I'm going to paint with pastels. If you want to get into animation, study animation artists, find storyboards by people that worked on Avengers, the movie or whatever, and copy that stuff and draw that, and figure out how are working people in animation, what does their art look like? And, at the beginning, when you're just learning, you're just mimicking it, but eventually you'll kind of find your own style. But it's definitely, working in animation, working in the business is a style of art. It's not just doing your own thing. It's knowing how to turn a character properly. If you're a character designer, you need sometimes it's 12 drawings of the character turning slowly in costume. I mean, that's a hard thing to learn, but if you have that skill, you can get a job. So, there's a very much a technical aspect to working animation, and just pursue that technical side and track down those artists that are online that you can see what they've done and see if you can, mimic it and then do it better.